says we're going to solve by factoring. So remember, our first step is to make sure it's set equal to 0, correct? So let's do that. How am I going to set 2x squared plus x equals 1 where it's equal to 0? Yeah, so we got 2x squared plus x equals 1. So move the 1 over. And so 2x squared plus x minus 1 equals 0. Excuse me. And then step 2 is to factor. Well, let's remind ourselves, what was our first step to factoring? Do you remember? Greatest common factor, right? So on this one, do I have a greatest common factor? No. 2x squared, x, and 1 are not divisible by any other number than 1. So no greatest common factor. Remember, our second step we said was to count the number of terms? How many terms does this one have? Alright, so this one has 3 terms. We had 2 types if there were 3 terms. We had the simple, which meant it had a 1x squared, or, I don't know why I said I went crooked here, sorry, or we had the alien, right? So which one is this? Alien. This is our alien. So remember with the alien woman goes on vacation. She kisses the man goodbye and she's gone. She's gone. So you don't write her down. What happens when they kiss though? He multiplies by her. So it's a minus 2. We factor this out. Now it's a simple. So we know our first terms have to multiply to be x squared, which are... And guys, let me point out, excuse me, that whatever variable I use right there, if you notice, will always be the variable from the middle, okay? And then we know our last terms have to multiply, remember, read it backwards. They multiply to 2 and subtract 2, what number's right there? A 1. So what multiplies to 2 that will subtract to 1? So 1 times 2 is 2, and they subtract to 1. Bigger number first. Bring down the first sign. And a positive 2 times what kind of 1 gives me a negative 2 there at the end? A negative. Now, am I done factoring? No, because this was an alien. So remember, she went on vacation, so she comes back. He's mad. They divide by her, the last number. Reduce it if possible. But what if I can't reduce it? Yeah, throw her back to the x. So, and even if I can reduce it, but it doesn't go to a whole number, I still have to throw the number on bottom back in front of that x. And bring down your equals 0. Yeah, that's the hardest part, is you've got to learn that after you factor, check, was this an alien? Alright, so, and then my last step to factoring was to check to see if factored completely, right? And so check your x plus 1, you can't factor it anymore. Check your 2x minus 1, you can't factor it anymore, so we are done factoring. Alright, so we are still on example 1 there, and we have factored it out. And let's see, when we factored it, what did we get again? X, help me, plus 1 equals 0, correct? Alright, so steps 3 and 4 are we're going to set each factor equal to 0 and solve the resulting equations. So remember, when they're being multiplied, you set them each equal to 0 and solve. So for the first one, I'm going to subtract the 1. And so we get x equals negative 1. And the second one, we add the 1. So 2x equals 1. And then divide by 2. And we get x equals 1/2. Alright, step 5 just says you should check the solutions in the original equation. So remember, our original equation was 2x squared plus x equals 1. And what were my answers again? We said it was -1 and +1/2. So saying we should check them. So when I check this one, 2x squared plus x, and we want to know, is that equal to 1? So plug your -1 in. Remember, when you're checking, you don't move things from side to side. You work one side and then you work the other. So when I'm working this left side, I know I do exponents first. And so this is 2 times, what is -1 squared? -1 times -1 is +1. And then I have plus a -1, which is -1. And then multiply. So 2 times 1 is -1 is. And then on the other side over here, we don't have anything to work. It's just a 1. So bring it down. Did it work? Yeah. So -1 is definitely an answer. And then we're going to do the same thing with the 1/2. So I'm going to set up my skeleton here. We want to know, is it going to be equal to 1? Plug in your 1/2. Now this one's a little trickier because it does have fractions, right? So use your calculator to help you some. Same steps though. We're going to do exponents first. So I have 2 times, what is 1/2 squared? 1/4. You write it twice, so it's 1/2 times 1/2, which is 1/4, right? Or if you put in your calculator, it tells you 0.25. And then we have plus 1/2. I forgot to draw my line. And then we multiply next. So the 2 times 1/4 is 1/2. And so my plus 1/2, which is 1. Now I'm going to go do the other side, but it's just a 1, so just bring it down. That's true. So x equals 1/2 is an answer as well. And so there's our 2 solutions. How did I know I should get 2 solutions? Because it was x squared. Remember, that tells us the number of solutions. All right, good job.